So, student loan forgiveness, a heavily redacted Biden administration memo, becomes public and apparently seems pretty interesting. So, welcome to 40inbox.com, where we help you get out of debt. So, a long awaited memo related to student loan debt cancellation is now public in a heavily redacted form. And if you don't know what redacted means, it means that basically they are hiding a lot of information. Okay? And so while the memo itself tells us almost nothing, experts believe its existence and paper trail proves that the president has the authority to forgive all debt, but lacks the political will to do so. This offers new evidence that every single lawyer who has looked at this issue, now including the lawyers at the Department of Education, reached the same conclusion. Mike Pierce, executive director and co-founder of the Student Borrower Protection Center, told Yahoo Finance. Joe Biden can cancel student debt with the flick of a pen. So the memo, unearthed roughly 6 months since its existence was made public, reminded advocates of what President Joe Biden promised during the 2020 presidential campaign. The Biden's administration's memo on student debt cancellation is just a reminder that the president has not delivered on his promises to student loan borrowers. Natalia Abrams, president and founder at the Student Debt Crisis Center, told Yahoo Finance. So the memo saga began on April 1st when White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain told Politico that the president asked Education Secretary Miguel Cardona to prepare a memo on the president's legal authority before any decision. This came after the president campaigned for the 2020 presidential election on the basis that he would forgive a minimum of $10,000 per person of federal student loans, which would erase all the student debt for 15 million of the nearly 45 million American borrowers. And so, to those that are just listening to this, apparently the outstanding U.S. student debt is at 1.73 trillion through recorded to 2021. So back in 2007, it was only at about 0.5 trillion. And now is all the way close to nearly $2 trillion in student loans. And federal student loans, I believe. So after months of radio silence on the matter in early October, House lawmakers led by Ilhan Omar called on the president and Cardona to release the long-awaited memo that would determine Biden's authority on the matter. They set a deadline for October 22nd, which passed without event. A week later, new documents, including the memo, were released after the activist group Debt Collective's Thomas Gilkey obtained them via a Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, request. But the documents were heavily redacted in pink and did not shed many details on the Education Department's determinations. But one part of the memo appears to not have been redacted, which refers to the authority Cardona has that allows him to extend the interest-free payment pause on federal and federally held student loans. So in this highlighted part, which the benefits provided to borrowers with department-held loans under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES Act, are effective. The use of the HEROES Act to effectuate those waivers and modifications in 2020 is consistent with the department's past practice. The HEROES Act was enacted by Congress in 2003, and the department issued its first notice of waivers and modifications pursuant to the HEROES Act that same year. And in the more than 17 intervening years, the department has continued to use this authority without legal challenge. So it also appears that the department had produced a memo titled "The Secretary's Legal Authority for Broad-Based Debt Cancellation" on April 5th. mere days after Klain had mentioned its existence. And as recently as October 21st, ED told Yahoo Finance that there were no update to share. And the education department did not respond to the request for additional comment, but advocates meanwhile continue to push for full cancellation as student loan payments are set to restart in a few months. So the basic argument for the president to be able to forgive student debt through executive action, as detailed by the Legal Services Center of Harvard Law School in a letter to Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, is that the education secretary has the power to cancel existing student loan debt under a distinct statutory authority, the authority to modify existing loans found in 20 U.S.C. 1082A4. It is worth noting that the department has hired Toby Merrill, who founded the Project on Predatory Student Lending at Harvard Law School and co-authored the legal analysis provided to Warren. So the nearly 2-year payment pause in student loan payments is expected to expire on January 31st, 2022. While restarting payments in itself is a painful process, as the department needs to communicate with millions of borrowers, more than 16 million student loan borrowers are also changing servicers, adding more complexity into the mix. So given this backdrop, the reality is that we do not need the memo, Abrams asserted. The president already has the legal authority to cancel student debt, and experts from across the country, including Harvard Law, agree. We do not need to wait for this piece of paper to fight for debt cancellation. We are doubling our efforts to mobilize millions of student loan borrowers, parents, and allies in support of student debt cancellation, Abrams added. So the student loan forgiveness tiers. So number of borrowers with federally backed student loans, 44,972,000, and the total amount of outstanding federally backed loans, 1.562, I believe. I think that's trillion. Yeah, I think that's trillion. Absolutely insane. So the number of borrowers who would see all debt erased would be in the 10,000 range, is nearly 15 million. Number of borrowers who would see all debt erased. Okay. It's really crazy when you really think about it, when you're looking at this, the stats, right? Because this gets into a weird situation. Now, to those that end up stumbling upon this, I understand that if you do have student loan debt, you're probably going to want this to actually happen, right? Obviously. Like, anyone is not going to say no to giving like 10K, 15K, 20K to pay off their loans, right? No one is going to necessarily say, oh no, don't give me that. But the thing is, this has a lot more effects than a lot of people actually think about. And then also, this doesn't actually solve the problem, right? This is basically like a band-aid. And what we mean by this is that, for example, how does it make sense to cancel student loan debt while also continuing to federally back student loans? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Now, to even go more on that, this is also a punishment to those who ended up paying off their student loans, going through that process, struggling, basically not going out to eat, not doing anything fun to pay off their student loans, right? Or for people who spent like 20, 30 years paying off their student loans and they finally paid off their student loans, this is also a punishment to them, because it's like, okay, they are now basically, in a sense, paying for other people to wipe out their student loans when they did not receive any assistance themselves, right? So is there going to be like a tax break for all the people that ended up paying off their student loans? Probably not, like, because the government wouldn't do something like that. But that's really the only way I could see where the government could justify doing something like this where they pay off student loans, they also give a tax break to the people who have been paying student loans and have also paid off their student loans, right? To make up for the fact that they basically did technically everything right by paying off their student loans without really any assistance. But again, no one's necessarily going to complain if you were to just receive like a $15,000 check in the mail to pay off your student loans. But then this also gets into a really weird situation. It's like, are they just going to send people a check, or are they actually going to just go in there and wipe it out? Because that leads to a whole set of bucket of worms if they start just giving people massive checks, right? Because think about it like this. Say someone made choices to where they are now 6+ figures in student loan debt, right? And they receive a check of 6 figures plus, right? Do you think that there's 0% chance that this individual is going to be stupid with that money? Like, that's something to really think about, right? Now, if they just basically go into their system and basically like be like, okay, everybody that has this amount of student loan debt, gone, right? Just like wipe it off of the whole system, right? Because again, the crazy thing about the whole economic system and the money system and all that kind of stuff, right? Nothing necessarily really exists. Same thing with the banks. If you were to actually understand how banks work, the money doesn't really actually exist. It's literally just like numbers basically in Excel worksheet that they transfer to other banks, right? Or basically call them up and be like, hey, put this number there for this person. So it's going to be pretty interesting. But again, anytime there's like an influx of money, which is most likely going to happen if they were to do something like pay off or like get rid of student loans, right? Is that it's going to cause even more of a situation of potentially hyperinflation to the country, because there's so many things on so many facets right now that are affecting basically everyday life, everyday commerce, right? Your gas is increasing. You can see it creeping up every single week, right? By a few cents every single week, or if not, like potentially $1 every week. Who knows? Like, you can see things start to get up, right? Your food at the grocery store is starting to get up, right? In some cases, like 30% higher on some food items, right? Or some pet supplies. So if the government keeps doing things like this, it actually makes the whole economy like in like a far worse situation than it already is, right? Because everything is going to just skyrocket in expense, right? You might think that you're getting like, true benefit, but in reality you're really not, because everything in your life is just going to skyrocket in price, like just skyrocket. But that being said, if they were to ever get rid of student loans, they have to also stop giving student loans. That's the only way to fix this problem. And here's another side that could fix like a lot of financial issues within this country, right? The biggest issue of the United States is that we don't produce anything that we basically sell to other countries for a lot of money, right? This is where you have basically some Middle Eastern countries, right, that could literally provide free healthcare, free education completely, no taxes at all, because their countries make so much money, right? Like there is, I believe, I can't remember the exact country. I believe it might be Saudi Arabia, potentially. But it is some country in the Middle East, right, that they are able to basically do everything that progressives want to do through the process of basically capitalism of making so much money by providing a product that so many people want for such good money that they could literally just bankroll everything, right? And that's where this country really needs to get to. Like if you want like if everyone wants like really good healthcare in this country, if everyone wants really good benefits in this country, we really need to push for the country itself to provide some sort of product or service that could generate massive amounts of money for the country as a whole, right? That's the really true only way for everything that everybody wants to get done in a smart way. Otherwise, you're basically going to screw over every single person within the country in a financial sense, right? You're going to screw over the poor, you're going to screw over the middle class, and you're going to screw over the rich. But the rich are going to be the only ones that could actually withstand anything. So feel free to stay tuned for more episodes. If you want to learn how to get out of debt, go to 40inbox.com.